Hello everyone, welcome back to Expletives Included, and today we're doing another video on What the Folk. Again, we're in keeping with the theme of giants. Today I don't have so much as a large story like I tried to do 2 weeks ago and Kia did last week. Instead I'm just going to try and kind of lay the groundwork for British giants, just give a bit of a basis for what they like to do, who they were. So, just kind of like a compilation of a few short stories. I couldn't really find anything long enough to ramble on for 5 minutes for any one particular giant. But to open up, in popular media, at least in Dungeons and Dragons, which is maybe the most common place that you'll see giants nowadays, maybe Game of Thrones, but I can't remember much about what they did other than kill people. Although it kind of ties into that. I'll stop rambling. Giants like to throw stones. It's something which they do. Maybe it's just kind of the idea that for a giant weapon or for a giant with a big axe, it's, well, maybe a bit too civilized. A big rock is a perfect weapon for a giant. But historically, this throwing of boulders, which seems that they have a penchant for, was a lot more innocuous, a lot more innocent. And to begin the stories, I'll talk about Idris Gara. Most of these are Welsh names, so I'm pronouncing them horribly. Idris Gara, who came from Idris Cader, which is the mountain that he lived, named after him. The story starts with just him walking around as he does, and one day he just got 3 pebbles in his shoe, and eventually they started to frustrate him, so he picked them out and just tossed them away. And now there's a road, which, give me 1 second. Sorry, the road between Makincliffe, again, Welsh pronunciation, and Dolgelly, which is a lot easier to say. On the road between those 2 towns are 3 large crags used as a waypoint that are quite huge, but as the story goes, they were just pebbles to this giant. Another thing which I should bring up is that these stones don't fit the geology of the area, which is true of quite a lot of these waypoints, a lot of these stones that kind of come up in these giant myths. They're not in the places that you'd expect them to be, and so the explanation to that, or explanation to go some way to explaining that, is that giants transported them there. Giants found them in their shoes and dropped them on the side of the road. Giants just were playing games and chucking stones about and kind of got them where they weren't supposed to be. Another story of a stone that's not where it's meant to be, or again, it's just another story of a giant, or giantess in this case, who got a stone trapped in her shoe and lobbed it away. The giant... I found 2 names for this giantess. One of them was Malwalby, and the other one was Moll Welbeck. I discovered the 2 names because she's not kind of like the main star of this story, but the stone that she threw away was. It goes that she went around and she built a lot of castles, and one castle in particular, the Castle of Hay, she built in a single night. But as she was travelling around the area collecting stones, which she would hold up in her apron to transport around, one of them fell into her shoe, which she subsequently picked up, tossed, threw away, and it landed in the Llywelys churchyard, which it now stays there with a Celtic cross. I think the Celtic cross is on the one side, and then later on there was the addition of a Christian cross on the other side. I think that's, again, I'm going to have to check names. St. Malig's cross. Lots of unusual names which I've had to try to learn for this episode and I haven't done a great job of. So, again, just a giantess walking around, gets an annoying stone in her shoe, throws it away to a place that it's unusual to find. This particular one was about 3 tons, I think, is the story. And yes, the stone is the kind of connecting point of the stories that I heard, and each one gave similar names to the giantess, but also a bit different. Another story chronicling giants' penchant for throwing stones is the giant Trickrug, who again lives on a mountain that was named after him, Trickrug, which is in Wales again. He enjoyed his sports, he enjoyed his games, so one day he invited all of his friends, all of his neighbouring giants, to have a game of quoits, a game of throwing stones, to see who was the strongest, who could throw their rock, their quoit, the farthest. And although all of them put up good sport and were making good throws for giants, Trickrug put them all to shame by throwing his rock from the mountain Trickrug in Wales all the way across to Ireland, which I tried to measure, and I think I clocked it in at about just over 100 miles for him to get to the nearest point in Ireland, which is quite a hefty throw. It's definitely something which stories are made of. So that's the story of Trickrug, the champion stone thrower of Wales. And then the fourth story I have is one of Stonehenge, which also has its Welsh name, which again I'll pronounce wrong, Corgwar. Corgara. It's spelt Gawr. I'm not sure how that's supposed to roll off the tongue. But that literally translates to Dance of Giants, or to Circle of Giants. And it's said that originally originally the stones came from Africa. Giants brought them from Africa to Ireland for their magical healing properties, though it's not stated what exactly they healed or what use they were put to. They were obviously quite important and a great boon to Ireland. However, Merlin, while being advisor to King Aurelius, I believe it was, the king who preceded Uther Pendragon, suggested to Aurelius that, who was searching for a monument of the time to show respect to dead British soldiers, Merlin suggested Corgara, and they went to Ireland to claim it as their own. And although they were successful in their expedition, in their quest to claim the stones, as soon as they went to move them, they weren't able. They were just too large and too heavy for any man to move. And there are two stories as to how they finally got Stonehenge from its locale in Ireland to Amesbury in England. The most popular theory is that Merlin wove some enchantment. He cast his magic and either teleported the rocks or somehow managed to make them transportable for the men to carry over to England. There's another story that it was English giants who carried all of the stones from Ireland to England. I like this one because it's more in keeping with the theme of giants, and also there are pictures of Merlin when they're erecting Stonehenge again in England. He's basically being the foreman and he's directing giants to build Stonehenge. So whether or not they brought them over to England, it's kind of inferred that giants did have some hand in kind of bringing the English Stonehenge. So another story about giants and big rocks. Those are the main stories of giants who are kind of lugging rocks around, chucking them about, having lots of fun with rocks, that I could find. There were more names and more instances, a lot more geological locations that appear in Britain. Again, there are lots of geological formations that are rocks that shouldn't be where they're found, and generally the consensus is that if there's a giant rock that's not fitting the geology, a giant must have left it there or thrown it there as either just throwing away a pebble from a shoe as we are wont to do, or just by having a game of quoits, throwing rocks, seeing who can get them furthest. And that's it for this episode of What the Folk. Hopefully you're a bit more caught up on the games that Giants play.